Right, we're live.
Yep.
Okay then, hello, and I think we should wait for actual viewers, but
Probably.
yeah, because currently no viewers. Oh, 3 people. It's a start. Right then, let's get this show on the road. Hello and welcome to another one of the Quidditch Post QUK open office hours. I'm Matt O'Connor, Deputy Editor, with my shiny little byline there, and with me we have QUK President Mel Piper.
Hello.
Vice President James Burnett.
Evening.
And BQC Bod Tom Challinor.
Hello.
So QUK has been soliciting questions from you guys all week now, I think. It's been a while. And so yeah, we're going to start from the top and go down because that's just easier. This was one that was actually submitted during Knights of the Round Table. It was more suited to coming out here. And the question is basically, does QUK have a system to promote Quidditch? If so, what is it, and how can we common Quidditch folk help out?
Okay, so I'll take this one. Our system has a name, and his name is Tom Fisk. He is our PR guy and deserves all the credit in the world for the amount of hours he puts in. Like about BQC, about literally anything, he basically contacts all the press he ever knows in the entire world and relentlessly emails them and contacts them and phones them, trying to get us any coverage we can, and it's yielding results. Like, he's got loads of people that are really interested in BQC and wider Quidditch in general. We tend to we're getting more and more emails, like on an almost daily basis, just asking us about it and how they can get involved and what more help they want to give. So I think a lot of credit first goes to Fisk. Also, because we're now part of the Sport and Recreation Alliance, we tend to get a lot of marketing through them as well. So, like going to events such as the divisional meeting that myself and Challinor and Meg went to a few weeks ago has really helped us and is increasing like our network basically. So the more like people further up that we know, the better you can be. Sorry, Slackboy, shut up. In terms of basically like for other people to like help out, volunteer for the communications department. That's the best way of doing it. It's a very overworked department because of how much they're trying to like market us, obviously. And Bidwell is also a very busy guy. So help out that way. Word of mouth is obviously very important. If you happen to know someone that's in a local paper or literally anything, just tell people all about Quidditch, and the more people that know about it, the more likely we are to get really good coverage, and the more likely we are to be taken seriously. Like, it's getting there. Like, there are less Harry Potter articles than there definitely were like a couple of years ago. People are starting to realise this is actually genuine, and the more genuine articles you can get, the better, basically. I hope that answers that question.
I think that was fairly comprehensive. So, I'm sure if not, the person will contact us and we'll ask the question again next month, whenever we do this again. The next question is something that's been a little bit controversial over in the States, I think, lately, and that is, will QUK consider implementing a transfer season system to prevent players from moving teams between the tournament qualifiers, so that would be the regionals, and the tournament itself, so BQC or EQC. If so, how many opportunities would there be to transfer? 1 per university team, 1 per season, only after regionals, etc.
So I'll take this one. Obviously, it pertains primarily to the teams department, and so this is partly being informed by what Scarlett has advised me. So obviously it is something that's important, and it does, where players can move and who and how they can play for teams does define the competitive season. So we do have to think carefully about the way our transfer system works, but it's not something to kind of rush into, because everything has permutations that are sometimes unforeseen. For example, kind of the premise of also the suggestion in this question, which, potentially not allowing after regionals, that would mean that if you play one major tournament, you'd be locked in for the rest of the season, which has its advantages in terms of consistency, but also has some downsides. So we are definitely looking at something that's more robust, and I know the teams department are working on a transfer system that incorporates sort of windows or seasons beyond, or defining the season beyond just the whole season of August to July. So you don't have too many instances of people kind of perceiving to have massively shifted the scales or trying to game the system by asking for transfers between big tournaments. But I think it's worth bearing in mind, obviously, we've just kind of we're a few weeks past the big flurry of that for BQC, and no matter when you have regimented transfer systems, at some point there is going to be the last moment you can transfer with a view to the next big tournament. There's always going to be a lot around then. Some of them are going to be controversial. So it's important to keep this in context, but we're aware we do need to provide a slightly more robust system. And I know the teams department are keen to make sure it is robust and it's bulletproof, which is why nothing has come forward yet, but it is something on our radar. And Scarlett has said she's very keen to have this discussion in terms of what's important to clubs at the next general forum.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds like we won't be hearing much before the next big general forum, but it is good to have something moving on that, because it's quite a big issue, really, and can very much change the season. On to the next question. This was fairly certain this was in one of the big worldwide groups on Facebook, a big discussion on this, and what is QUK's position on the no-hand snitch handicap? Will it be in place at BQC, and do you believe it is dangerous to the snitch runner and should be removed?
Okay, so I'll answer this one. So in light of, there's been a lot of people asking this since Valentine's Cup especially, so we've just been discussing this internally over the last month or so. We're going to be, as a department, reviewing all the snitch handicaps and making sure that we're only using snitch handicaps that are safe for both the seekers and for the snitches. It's incredibly important that the seekers and the snitches are safeguarded from any potential injuries. There's obviously a reason why why USQ have got rid of the two-arm handicap. The handicaps will remain as they are for BQC, but we'll be doing our comprehensive review after BQC, where we'll be updating the gameplay event requirement guidelines. And this is something that will be discussed. We'll be looking to see if there's any feasible alternatives, and this will be something that we're working on very actively, with a view to have this system improved for next season.
So would that be, we're looking at that, would be like a general consultation, or would it be in-house, or would you talk to the captains? The discussion, we've already been having discussions within our department, so we continue those, and when we feel like we're getting towards a decision, we would like to involve members of the community. We'd like to hear any feedback that anyone has on this issue. The more on this, if anyone has anything they want to send into Quidditch UK, the better. But we'll be making a decision on this very shortly, and this is something that we're going to be very active on, make sure that we stamp out any unsafe potential handicaps. Yeah, safety obviously paramount concern to anyone who plays the game. Moving on to this one. This one's on reffing. do you think it would be likely to incorporate an element of practical assessment of being an AR, or to be able to take the test as practical instead of written, purely due to the fact that someone might not test very well on the page, but when they're out there reffing, they're actually competent as a ref? So,
I'm happy to answer this one again. So, as a bit of background, last season, obviously, we were working with the IRDP, and they were arranging head ref field tests. This season, we've been working with our own assessments. We've been doing our own We've been doing our own theory assessments that we've been doing through ClassMarker, and we've been building up to try and do practical assessments as well, because we've agreed as a department that having practical assessments on top of the assessments that are done through ClassMarker is a better test for new referees. We did our first head referee field test at Valentine's Cup, and we're working on implementing more head referee assessments in the future, and we've been working towards extending this to assistant refs, snitch refs, and snitches possibly in the future. It will depend what happens with the new IQA tests for next season. If we decide to go with the IQA's rulebook starting from the beginning of next season, they may have their own rules on what they want to do with head referee field testing and potentially other referee field testing. But it's something that we definitely feel is important. The only issue that we have at the moment is the logistics of actually testing several referees over the course of the season is very, very challenging. We don't necessarily have the resources to be able to go out and assess every single referee as they pass their tests, at least not within. It would have to take, in most cases, several weeks to several months to be able to test all of our volunteers as they come through. But it's definitely something that we feel is an important part of the future of assessing referees, and it's definitely something that we're working towards. Yeah.
So would that be? I'm fairly certain this is further down the questions, but would the solution be to almost do what other sports do and run a course like the snitch workshop and certify 10, 15 people at a go?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've considered. So having a snitch workshop and having the snitch referee, the snitch development coordinators at the workshop to be able to go and certify a lot of snitches at once would be ideal. And this is probably how we would approach this if we decided to referee. We decided to field test a lot of people at once. But obviously, we'd have to run a lot of workshops over the course of the season in order to catch everyone, because the referees and snitches are spread out across the whole of the UK. We couldn't necessarily get everyone to one workshop. We'd have to plan a lot over the course of the season, and we'd have to look into the logistics of planning several workshops over the course of the season, because our staff members are doing a lot of work, and it's more work.
It's understandable. One for the future then when we get a bit bigger. This one's this one and then the next one are both gender related. So what are you doing, or what do you plan to do, to prevent the seeming marginalisation of AFAB, so assigned female at birth players, from Quidditch, i.e. them not getting played much, if at all? We, QUK, as community and governing body, seem to be inclusive to all other genders except the ones the gender rule was originally put in place to protect.
Yeah, so I'll field this one. So the first thing I want to say on this is just kind of, I guess, clarifying some misassumptions in the question. I guess it's a subjective opinion to say that it's close to AFAB players not being played at all. We clearly see them not getting as much pitch time as AMAB players, which is an issue. But the particular thing that concerns me is the assumption that the gender rule was put in place to protect AFAB players. I mean, to make reference to the rule itself, the rule in question is 7.1.3b. It's on page 128 of the rule book, and the relevant wording here is the gender that a player identifies with is considered to be that player's gender. So there's no mention of designation at birth, and in fact, 2 rule books ago, the rule was 2 minimum, and it was worded very clumsily to say that you had to have at least 2 players who identified with a different gender to the rest of the team, which achieved the same effect. There's been no change in rule effect, but since the change to 4 maximum phrasing was sort of an emphasis, really, on the fact that it is about a diversity of gender identities and about keeping Quidditch inclusive and not scrutinising or chastising people based on their gender, whether they are AMAB or AFAB, and whether they are cisgender or transgender. So it's not a correct statement to assert that the rule was put in place to protect AFAB players. It was put in place to protect, and it still serves to protect, gender diversity. Having said that, there clearly is an issue, as I said earlier, that women are not played, not treated fairly, I suppose, in Quidditch. I would say that women are treated far more fairly in Quidditch than they are in most sports, but that is not something to rest on, because you do still see a lot of teams will only just adhere to the gender rule. Most teams on their rosters, women are in a significant minority, and there is a general understanding, I suppose, or a general misunderstanding that this is normal, that no one too openly, I suppose, or not many people openly challenge the prevalence of teams which have 4 male players as the vast majority or the entirety of their roster. Of their on-pitch presence. Having said which, with reference to the rule again, this has been brought up, I think, in the past in other discussions, but I think it's important to remember that to assume that the rule is the fundamental problem with marginalising women in Quidditch is to assume that being a woman Quidditch player or being an AFAB Quidditch player is an inherent disadvantage. And of course, it's a disadvantage in the way you're perceived. There is confirmation bias going against you. There's social biases. But we do not want to endorse the idea that, and I think there's another question that will encompass this discussion more fully coming up shortly. We do not want to embrace the idea that there is some fundamental disadvantage with being a woman or with being AFAB in terms of your ability as a Quidditch player, which is why the What Quidditch UK are trying to do to counteract the marginalisation of AFAB players and to encourage women in sport or women in Quidditch is not to do with the rules. Obviously, the things we've achieved this season are our partnership with This Girl Can, which I think was very well received and kind of did generate a lot of awareness for some of the excellent women we do have in Quidditch. I know a lot of people made those graphics that you could get through the This Girl Can project, and I think a few people still have those as their profile pictures on Facebook and stuff like that. It's very, it's still something that we feel, and that's kind of the kind of step, the kind of community mentality and social change, which is the way we can address this problem. And similarly, the inaugural episode of our Knights at the Round Table symposium last weekend was entitled Gender Equality in Quidditch, Overcoming Gender Stereotypes During Competitive Play. And I'd hope it sends a strong message. We certainly intended it to, that with this project that we are launching to stimulate discussion on important topics, that we chose to lead that with one of the most important topics, which is making sure that Quidditch Quidditch prides itself on being a gender-inclusive sport, and that one of the things we were pushing is making sure that remains. And we're also looking at it as part of our coaching development, because nurturing people who, from a social point of view, are discouraged or do not have the encouragement that their peers have to be competitive, to be athletic, to believe that they can play to the same level, is a big part of coaching. So we definitely need to do more because the playing field is not level. And I think it's important to note that in spite of what's just been said, we are still seeing trailblazing women at the very top of our game. We have some fantastic role models, some fantastic women role models in Quidditch, not just for other women, but for all of our athletes. And I think it would be remiss of us to discuss this and not to acknowledge them. But, you know, the things we are doing are clearly at the moment, we need to do more. And we absolutely welcome any input ideas on how we can improve our development of women in the sport and continue to move towards a more level playing field where we do have a fairer representation of all our community on the pitch at any one time.
Yeah, it's good to hear that we're not sort of resting on our laurels going, ooh, we're the most gender inclusive sport, and instead working towards, you know, being the best we can be. That is definitely good to hear. So moving on, this is another question regarding gender. Would Quidditch benefit from implementing a sex rule rather than a gender rule? Under this rule, players who were AMAB and trans male, I believe, would play as male players, and likewise for AFAB and transgender female players, which, as far as I read it, would essentially remove the idea of a non-binary player. The person who asked this question goes on to say, personally, I think it's great that people are comfortable in their gender, but it could be argued that your gender doesn't impact on your ability to play Quidditch. As William said in the discussion on Sunday, the Knights of the Round Table discussion, they are gender flux, but it doesn't impact their ability to play Quidditch if they feel more masculine on Tuesday and more feminine on Thursday.
So I'll take this one again because it follows on from what I was just saying. As you alluded to, there's a little bit of ambiguity in the question. It's not 100% clear to me whether when the question talks about a transgender male, they're referring to a trans man or to an AMAB trans woman. But either way, I think the ambiguity itself emphasizes a division which isn't really there. Kind of bringing up the latter part of the question, gender doesn't influence your ability to play Quidditch. And, you know, I'm not going to refer to what William said, and I'm not going to take him out of context because he was very clear that that was a personal decision that he would not want to project on anyone else. But it is something, you know, your gender, your identified gender is not a reflection of your ability to play Quidditch. Be that as non-binary, be that as a man, or be that as a woman. The reason we still perceive differences in the relative sporting abilities of men and women is a combination of confirmation bias. There's this social expectation that we expect men to be better at sport. So, you know, it's something that's said a lot. But if you see a man screw up on pitch, never going to cross your mind that they're screwing up because they're a man. Whereas that is something that, even if it's just a subconscious threat, women are always having to resist. Even in their own minds, I think often, you know, these are things that pervade not just kind of onlookers, but people themselves, subconsciously. And also, you know, compounding that, there's the fact that most boys are encouraged to compete in sports seriously from the ages of as young as 3 and 4, whereas girls, by comparison, a lot of them, they're sort of begrudgingly allowed to play sport a bit from the age of maybe 12. And that formative basis has a massive impact on the nurtured ability of an athlete. So implementing or endorsing a rule that's based on sex, whichever, you know, however it professed to respect trans people, would be patronizing to our AFAT players and cruel to trans players, because for many trans players, Quidditch is the only place in which they can be at ease in their identity without fear of harm or judgment. And when I say trans players there, I do include non-binary players as well as binary trans players. Without even going into the impact of triggering dysphoria, which, context for people who don't know, this is a medically documented phenomenon. There are people far more qualified to talk about it than I, but it's essentially, for trans people, has documented medical effects from a mental health point of view, based on their dissonance between their assigned gender and their actual gender, and is demonstrably exacerbated by people highlighting, or systems which highlight or force them to confront any kind of perceived juxtaposition between their actual gender and the gender that people expect them to have. And you're forcing a trans player to play as their assigned at birth gender, which I'm not sure if that is what the question was posing, but I think it's ambiguous. If that were the case, that would rob them of Quidditch as somewhere, where they were safe. That's especially true, as I said, if the question posed sort of, for example, a transgender male as an AMAB trans woman and a transgender female as an AFAB trans man. But even if not, even if the question supposes to allow trans men to play as men and trans women to play as women, that firstly still excludes non-binary people, but also it invites into Quidditch the pejorative and invasive scrutiny which trans athletes face in other sports. And I mean, if you think about it realistically, I don't have the figures on the top of my head. I may be wrong. I believe the estimation is somewhere between 0.5 and 1% of the adult public. I think these are American figures, are believed to be transgender. And you just almost never see trans athletes at the high levels of established sports. And a major factor in that, I think it's fairly evident, is the fact that because all these sports are categorized so rigidly into men and women, a trans person has to undergo immense scrutiny to determine which box they're supposed to be put into. And there's no way we can safely protect our players if we want to incorporate something like that into Quidditch. Even if you're saying you're dividing it on sex, but you're comfortable saying a trans man plays with men and a trans woman plays with women, you're saying, well, I say play with. We're not segregating them in terms of teams, but, counting trans men and trans women as women, because they are men and women, still having to undergo scrutiny to determine that they are, or even worse, if someone took it upon themselves to conclude that a trans woman didn't count for whatever reason as a woman, could cause massive amounts of harm. And I mean, if we are saying that, if the proposal of the sex-based rule was to allow all men and women, trans or cis, to play as men and women, then the premise, which we've already addressed, and I think the premise is faulty, that whether you're AMAB or AFAB is a relevant factor in your ability athletically. If you're treating trans people as their gender rather than making reference to their assigned sex at birth, that sort of takes the basis of the rule out as anything drawing on biology or physiology, and really just contributes with no tangible benefit to the erasure of non-binary players. So there's no way that we can see that a sex-based rule, even if we took every other effort to make it inclusive to trans people, the sport would suddenly have an inbuilt assertion that there is some difference between a trans man or woman to a cis man or woman, and also that a non-binary person is some kind of other or alien, none of which is something we're comfortable adopting or comfortable imposing on our players. Beyond that, as I've said already, there is this kind of assumption implicit in a sex-based rule, in a reference specifically to the protection of AFAB players or of women, that to be AFAB or to be a woman is inherently an athletic disadvantage, which is a real sort of kick in the teeth to the AFAB players who are at or striving towards the top of the sport, and who are proving that they can complete on an elite level in Quidditch in exactly the same way as all other players. As I said in the answer to the last question, we definitely need to do more to combat the fact that women players, even in Quidditch, are marginalised. But introducing a rule change based on sex, which tells AFAB players that they are inherently worse, and forces trans players to get through a minefield of confronting harmful perceptions about their gender and expectations from which Quidditch should be a safe haven and has been in the past, is not only a bad way of trying to fight that marginalisation, but also will cause active harm. And I think for that reason, we can give a definitive answer and say that Quidditch UK opposes that kind of change to the sport at any level. We've just covered the reasons it would be dangerous and inappropriate, but there's also a practical element to that. Obviously, it bears mentioning that the gender rule is not within Quidditch UK's remit. We'd have to lobby the IQA for a rule change of this scale, and obviously we have 2 delegates. We're one of the small number of countries that do, so we do have influence at the IQA, but it just bears mentioning. But even if that was something we wanted, there's moves towards, as I said, perpetuating these damaging stigmas surrounding women in sport. I think it's worth mentioning that ideally there'd be no targets for the gender rule. Our ultimate goal in Quidditch, as we hope it permeates down to school levels and development levels, is to use Quidditch as a proof of the inclusivity of sport, to breed a culture, a sporting culture with equal opportunities, where 5-year-olds of all genders can play Quidditch on an equal field competitively from the age of 5. Now, we recognise that's an ambitious goal, but it is something that Quidditch has achieved it in our age group within Quidditch, and it is breaking down those barriers is a fundamental social goal of Quidditch. And with progress towards that, we'll be moving towards the potential to develop teams of young adults, those 5-year-olds who have played on an equal footing from the age of 5, who don't need minimum gender rules, because the percentage and perception of talented players across genders is even. The problem is ultimately not about the rule. It's the culture of sport and how and when genders are encouraged to play. So to put it another way, and I know I've gone on a bit, so this will be kind of the final thing I say on this, the end goal of the gender rule has to be its own obsoletion. A point where we look at the gender rule from a perspective of athletes who respect each other as athletes and have moved beyond the social stigmas, to seeing it as a weird, clunky, archaic thing which has no bearing on current teams, because no one perceives athletes as different because of sexes or genders anymore. And it's not, the objective of it is not what this proposed rule in the question would suggest, which would be to perfect the regulation of mix of genders or sexes, because there is no perfect way to regulate players when the parameters you're using to do that are based on imposing harmful social constructs such as sex and such as gender.
Fairly complete answer there. I don't think I need to add much more to that. Let's move on to our 7th question now, if I can count, which is entirely possible. And that is from Hannah, whose surname I don't know, Hannah from Kiel, is asking, would it be possible to encourage the use of official means of communication rather than simply Facebook messaging, with all respect to all aspects of Quidditch, not just contacting you guys, but for team organisation, so contact only to the official pages for the club or the club email. Also, this is something I'm sort of adding on as an afterthought to this question. Would it be possible to sort of have a platform for just setting up matches where the teams sort of organise between themselves?
You're going to get tired of my voice. I promise I'll let one of my friends answer a question eventually, but I'll be taking this one as well, unfortunately for you lot. The first thing is, obviously, we as an NGB, we've been massively overstepping our remit to try to force teams to communicate in a certain way. from our point of view, when we want to make direct contacts to teams, we will email them. So I guess we do that in that respect. And as much as you have kind of the liberty to just send emails and let people see them or not, that is a way to do it. But really, the easiest way, if you want a team to email you rather than contact you on Messenger, is to do what we have to do a lot less now, because we've done our time of replying like this. Is when someone sends you a message, say, thanks for getting in touch, interested in what you have to say, can you please send me an email to fill in the email. It's something that's a culture shift that does take time. The culture shift of speaking to organisations like Quidditch Post, like Quidditch UK, like the IQA, people understand now that you do that by email or by contact forms. It will take a bit of time to make that permeate down to clubs, and it will take some action on behalf of the clubs, but it will happen. Something we had very much hoped to do this season, obviously most people will be aware that the functionality of our website and our servers have been curtailed by staff deficiencies, effectively. We'd hoped to have club emails based on the @quidditchuk.org handle in the same way as our staff do. That would be the locus for formal communication, mainly from Quidditch UK, but also, of course, with free use from clubs this season. That hasn't happened so far, but we have very recently taken on a webmaster, which was the real position we were lacking. And obviously, you'll appreciate there's a lot of catching up to do in terms of projects and housekeeping that has been left for most of the season. But that is something we hope to introduce eventually. And I hope that once we have official club emails, everyone will clearly know the email of another club, and it will be accessible on the website, and everyone will have one, and everyone will be needing to use it for Quidditch UK purposes anyway. That will facilitate kind of the easy communication of clubs by email, because once it's easily possible for all clubs to communicate by email, it's just a case of when someone tries to contact you another way, just point them in the right direction.
Short and sweet, I like it. Where were we up to? So yeah, that's basically teams repeat, be like training a dog. Will photographers at BQC be apportioned so that each side gets at least some gameplay photos? This is a matter that's very close to my heart. I assume this goes to Tom?
Yes, I'll answer this one. So this was a question that came up in our last open office hours. Whenever we had, it was in November, I think it was. So the issue was that due to the number of volunteers we had at Northern to take photos, unfortunately St Andrews didn't get any official photos taken of them. So moving forward, last BQC we didn't have any official Quidditch UK staff that were designated to taking pictures officially for Quidditch UK. A lot of the pictures that came from last year's BQC were taken by spectators. So we've, over the course of between BQC and regionals, we've recruited volunteers to take pictures, and they were the ones who took pictures at regionals. So obviously with BQC, we're going to be using those staff members to take as many pictures of as many teams as is physically possible. And wherever absolutely possible, we will make sure that teams get pictures taken of them. The only slight caveat to that is the fact that we own, as I've said, we didn't have any volunteers this time last season. We've now taken on a couple more volunteers, but we're still short on volunteers. So whilst we'll aim to get as many teams covered as possible, it's within the remits of the number of volunteers and how feasibly possible it is to actually get pictures of every team. So we can't guarantee that there will be extended coverage of every single team, but we will aim to get as many teams pictures as is physically possible over the course of the weekend.
Okay, short question, short answer. It's much better. This one from Ben Middlemiss, and also there's another one further down that's anonymous. And has there been any progress in gaining recognition with Sport Scotland and Sport England after the matter was turned over to QUK last year?
Okay, so I got all the fun questions. Please note that. In terms of Sport Scotland, it was never officially handed over to Quidditch UK. We had a player that was in contact with them. Sadly, that line has gone down now, so I'm literally going to spend my day tomorrow finding, or contacting them again and getting back in contact with Sport Scotland. In terms of Sport England, I've been more focused on that one. Obviously, the majority of our teams are in England, so that kind of makes sense. But the criteria to be a sport in Sport England have annoyingly slightly changed. Before, it was you needed simply 2 years of financial records being the only thing we were missing. By the end of this season, we'll have 1 set, so then by next summer, we'd have 2. Now you also need to have 2 years of AGM minutes, so an annual general meeting each year. So thankfully we've noted this now, meaning that we are now in the planning of working out how to do an AGM, so we can do it for the next 2 years, meaning we can pre-register, but you have to pre-register before you, and get your application approved for that stage first, before you can do the full application afterwards. So we can then pre-apply or pre-register by in 2017 in the summer, because we'll then have all the correct records that we can send to them. I have looked into the full registration stuff, and the majority of that stuff we can tick boxes straight away, and because a lot of it's kind of the more wordy stuff, like how you get people involved in sport, or what are the good points. Well, we can talk about that for England. We do not need help with that part. Ours is literally just getting the financial records and the AGMs, and because we're such a small organisation still and still very much developing, these are things that are just going to have to come with time, and it's an annoyingly long process. I'd love to be like Sport England, certified tomorrow, but sadly we just have to grin and bear it and just do what we can beforehand to make sure that that application does go through.
Unmute myself before I start talking. Might be an idea. So we're waiting a couple of years on that then. Still, it's good to see there's actually progress being made there. Do we have, this is from an anonymous person who hasn't actually even given a name, is there any news on the coaching workshops?
Okay, I will answer this one again. This is a very short answer. We're in the process of planning coaching workshops with the intention of having them over the summer, coaching workshop or workshops depending on how feasible it proves to be. We've done some of the groundwork within our department. We're currently looking at locations and trying to find somewhere to have a coaching workshop. So watch this space over the next few weeks / months, and we'll be there will be announcements on this quite a bit down the line, because we've still got a lot of planning to do, but this is something that we're planning over the summer.
Over the summer then.
Yeah.
That's good to see we've actually got some proper coaching workshops. It's something that's been lacking in the sport so far. This one probably mixes with one later on from Ash Cooper. But why aren't the minutes being published every week? You write them, why not publish them? Then we get to rejoice in the great work that you are doing. So we'll merge this one with the one from Ash, because basically the same question. Could it possibly be that we see a return of the 2 weekly / monthly newsletter direct to our inbox that we get as QUK members?
So just quickly on the minutes, I think Mel has something to say on the newsletter front, but we are publishing the minutes every week with usually no more than sort of a week's delay. We're not throwing social media posts about every set of minutes because honestly they're not that interesting, and I think if you guys were seeing a social media post every week that we'd put minutes up, you'd very quickly tune them out. If people overwhelmingly do want a weekly reminder that we've updated the EMT minutes, then by all means let us know by email or contact form or general forum, and that's something we can do. But they are there. If you go to quidditchuk.org/about/constitution, which page is a bit of a misnomer at this point, I grant you. It's just turned into a page of any important documentation. But at the bottom of that page, we have the minute summaries of both EMT and General Forum since they began as ongoing documents by year. So you'll see the EMT minute summaries. There's a full document for all the minute summaries we have from 2015. And there's a 2016 one, and that 2016 one is updated, as I said, on about a weekly basis with maximum of about 1 week's latency. And the General Forum minutes are updated shortly after each General Forum. So they are there on the website. We're just not fanfaring them on a weekly basis because we've judged that is not something that people are particularly kind of bothered about. But as I said, let us know if that's wrong. We will be sending the link out and scheduling it from time to time, probably every month or so. So it will be something that will be keeping going on people's radar. But they are there. We're just trying not to shove them down your throat. Mel, do you want to take the newsletter?
Yeah. Basically, in terms of the newsletter, obviously we'd love to bring that back. I remember doing it when I was Teams Director. Sadly, everything's grown a lot since I was Teams Director in just that short space of time. So we struggle to have people to have the time to do it. That is literally the only thing that's stopping it. That alongside, we have obviously problems with the website, meaning we haven't got all the data to kind of send an email out to everyone nice and simply, and in the way that we used to send out the newsletter. Obviously, the comms department, as I said previously, is also very overwhelmed. If you really want to be in charge of the newsletter and have that as your baby, then please volunteer. That would obviously help that come along much smoother. Until basically just know that it's something we're definitely working on and really want to do. It's something I'm very passionate about because it should be transparent as much as physically possible. It's literally just a case of staff and the website, all of which we're trying to get sorted. We just need people's help.
Standard QUK disclaimer: if you think we can do better, or they can do better, sorry, volunteer. Same goes for the post, actually. Please volunteer your time. All of your time will be Quidditch. Talking of volunteering, actually, because that's a fantastic lead-in, what incentives will you provide to make full-time and event volunteering, such as tournament director, scheduling manager, more attractive in future? Okay,
so I'm going to answer the first bit, and then when it gets on to event volunteering, Challinor is more placed to talk about that. Basically, there's kind of 3 main really good reasons as to why you should work for Quidditch UK. This is not me selling it to you. This is just generally going to break it down. That sounds like I was going to do a sales pitch, which I could do, but I feel we need to be able to do it. So to start with, there's the fun side. So you get to know a lot of people from the community. That's always a nice thing. In terms of more physical things and things that people are interested in, aka free things, you get the perk box deals. We previously decided, instead of the stipends which were originally put in the strap plan for myself and the vice president at the time, we got rid of those and instead used it to pay for perk box, which means that all our 36 volunteers, or I'm sure it's about 36 volunteers, can all get free stuff. That includes things like free cinema tickets, taste cards, basically lots of different, I think paintballing's on there as well. I'm sure someone's got loads of paintballing tickets from it. There's lots and lots of different things on there for our staff to have as kind of a thank you for working for us, because they put in a hell of a lot of effort all the time, all year round, that some people just don't see. Some of them particularly work very much behind the scenes and never get any credit for it, and they deserve a lot more credit than they actually are due. You also get merchandise discounts on all BQC merchandise and basically all the merchandise at all our events, which is also kind of not known and should be more publicised than it probably actually is. There's also the kind of more soft benefits, I suppose, is what you'd call them. I'm not sure if that's the right word. But in terms of personal development, I know myself that I've grown a lot in terms of confidence and leadership abilities and all that type of stuff. None of this came naturally to me. It's just something I ended up doing and kind of doing well, I'm hoping. Please tell me if I'm not, because that'd be great to know. But along those lines, in terms of CB building, we could talk about it for days. And that's the most important thing. And also the fact that you're actually improving a sport. Like, people kind of forget about the fact that we're a very baby sport. This is the 5th season of Quidditch happening in the UK. Probably like the 3rd with it actually happening properly, with BQC being like a big thing. It's such a founding sport compared to sports that have been around for years. There are sports like korfball that have been around 50 years and are still considered like fringe sports. We're growing at a kind of probably a more rapid rate than what they were, due to the fact of, I mean, social media is very much helpful in this, and in fact we can all talk to each other. But you can have such a say now in the makings of a sport that you wouldn't do in any other sport, where you'd have so much more hierarchies and things. The fact that we kind of have the ability to like have chance to implement different rules and things, the fact we get to make ref tests, all of that type of stuff, which is all done by just us. Like, we all came from the same background, and we just chose a Quidditch team. The majority, like 99% of us, all just went to university and found a Quidditch team, or found a local Quidditch team to us, and that's how we got involved in the sport. And what we've actually done is pretty incredible. So if you want to do that too, do the voluntary thing. I'll let Challinor speak now, so I get off my post and sit down.
Okay, so in terms of events and tournament directing and everything, we have had a worryingly low number of people apply for positions for both regionals and for BQC this season, which has meant that we've been running with smaller committees than we would have ideally liked to have run with. So moving forward to next season, it looks like we're going to have to try and find some way of encouraging more people to have a go at tournament directing or / any kind of position on a committee. It's a great position to be able to sort of build up to an actual official permanent position. It's a good sort of test for getting involved with Quidditch, seeing how much you enjoy having a permanent position, a temporary position, then moving it on and transitioning into a permanent position, like I have and like many others have done. But in terms of actual rewards, it's getting to a point where we've discussed the idea of possibly paying for trying to cover expenses for people that volunteer for committees, such as giving them a little bit towards travel expenses to accommodation expenses, so that at least they're travelling to the tournament knowing that it's not a huge amount of money coming out of their pocket, especially if they're going as a non-playing member of the tournament committee. And also, both myself and the rest of my department are going to be working on documentation to help improve the amount of help that's given for people trying to plan tournaments, both Quidditch UK organised tournaments and any other Quidditch UK sanctioned tournaments. So the more help that we can give to people that perhaps look at tournament directing and think, oh god, that's scary, I don't know what I'm going to do, this looks a bit overwhelming. The more support we can give to people that are perhaps unsure whether they have the right amount of experience to take on this kind of role, the better. Obviously, the thing is, as has been said several times tonight, I know there are a lot of people that are very passionate about tournaments and this kind of thing. If you do think that we can be making changes and you have really great ideas about things that you can do that will make tournaments better, the best way to go about that is by volunteering for a tournament committee, or just volunteering in any general capacity. The more you are involved, the more say you have in how things are run, the more change you can make to how events are run. Events are a large part of Quidditch, especially in the run-up to BQC. So if you're active, if you have a lot of opinions about this kind of thing, then by all means, the more active you are and the more involved you are in this kind of thing, the better.
Okay, yeah. Good to see that. I think travel, especially in this country, is a big sticking point for people. So reimbursement could go, or at least partial, could go a long way to helping. While we're talking about money, can we expect a publication of the finances from this season and the last season If so, when? If not, why not?
Yep, okay, I've got this one. There we are. Basically, once we're registered as a company, which will be happening soon, I always say this every time, but we are legit like doing it, so bear with us. Like our tax year would fall annually between August and July, so it goes for the entire season. But as I said previously, our first set of full financial records will be for this season, so we'll have our first year of records. Last season, because of treasurers changing over, etc., and like obviously the organisation growing, we've only got partial records, so that's not like very like easy to publish. However, in terms of this season, they will be like properly published at the end of the year. I can give you a nice rundown now, though, if you like, from the current year. So I'm sure everyone will be very excited. Meg gave me this, so I am going to slightly read it out. So I apologise for that. Basically, this year we made £800 overall from both regions put together, and that money was straight away reinvested into BQC. We are currently working completely below budget and have put in place substantial changes to how we bank. For example, we've realised that PayPal was taking away a lot of our money when people gave it to us. They just take a good proportion of it. By people actually just bank transferring us instead, or paying that slight extra to use PayPal for its ease of use, we've saved over £1,000 already. That figure's already enough to cover all of our general overheads that we generally need. And again, as I said previously, instead of the 2 bursaries for the president and vice president that were mentioned in the strat plan, that was then taken out as a reward scheme, the perk box thing, for 36 members of our staff. It's also worth noting that we've got proper financial software now in place that Meg uses all the time, which means we've got a much better idea of like how we trace our expenditure and a better way of working out staff expenditure and budgeting and literally all of that things, so that everything is nicely in one place and accessible and really easy to understand and use. Due to all of those reasons, it also means that we'll be able to start work on Northern and Southern much earlier this year. Last year we had to wait for the player fees to actually come in for us to be able to pay for any of the venues or insurance or literally anything. This year we're already going to have some finance available to start like the groundwork for those without so not having to wait until all the player fees come in, which obviously takes much more time. If we can get some groundwork under the way, that's always good. That's a kind of financial roundup. If you want more information, just email the relevant person. So Meg.
Yes, I suppose it'd be good to actually see medals for Northern appear at Northern as opposed.
Oh, I mean that would be brilliant. That would be the dream.
So yeah, I'm sure early payment is good payment.
Yes, definitely.
So moving on again, more money questions. Yes, more money questions. Sorry, I've jumped around a little bit, so I lost my place. This is from Phil. Can we expect an increase in team and player membership fees next year as the cost of running QUK inevitably increases as the sport expands?
Yeah, so the short answer is probably. This isn't something I've kind of, I'm not getting this information from Meg, so this is take this with a pinch of salt. Because it isn't something we've planned at this point. It isn't something we've set out kind of clearly with the finance department. I would not expect a drastic spike unless there was some clear, overarching, tangible kind of expenditure that we were incurring for the benefit of all clubs that had a proportional cost attached. But it's always in terms of the fees we charge. As we've said, we've been fortunate with a bit of kind of clever financing here, for which all credit goes to Meg. And obviously, we can, we're always setting aside some contingency space in our budgets for our tournaments and our overall budget, which, all being well, we don't have to use, which will leave us a little bit of overflow. So we do have, in terms of our projections so far, a little bit. We're coming in a little bit under budget for the 2015-2016 season, which is nice, but it's not a drastic amount. So broadly speaking, we're spending what we're taking in, and no more, but not much less either. Which means what we're charging clubs and teams for membership and what we're charging, clubs and players for membership and what we're charging clubs and players for competition at our events is proportional to what we can offer. We understand, obviously, that most of our demographic is students, and people base the costs on what they're used to, which means a drastic increase isn't going to happen, as I said, without as much forewarning as we can offer, and a very clear benefit that everyone will enjoy. We're not going to suddenly hike up membership fees by 300% so that the trophies are solid 24 karat gold. So yeah, the short answer is I would say it is reasonable to expect a small proportional increase in membership dues along the lines of, obviously this year we had the club and team thing skewed things a bit, but broadly speaking, for a single club, membership went up from 40 to 60, I believe, and individual membership went up from 3 to 5. I'm not going to project what they're going to be next year, but that seems, I would hope that was not considered a disproportionate increase. And the more we take in fees, the more we can offer. I would say, without stepping on Tom's shoes, I would be expecting the cost of events to plateau sooner than the cost of membership. But please, as I said, we'll take all of that provisionally because we've not worked out our concrete financial projections for next year yet. So if we do come back and have to charge £10 membership, or if we do come back and still charge £5, don't quote me on this because this is just my projection.
In short, we don't know yet, but we'll tell you, and it's not going to be massively humongous, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, I was paying £30 when I was a member of GB Rowing, so £5 isn't much. So this is a very short question, but basically, it just says snitch and ref qualifications. So I assume that's field testing for obviously qualification for snitches and more field testing, but I'm not entirely sure what that question's. It's a little bit too short to be useful. But if someone wants to take a stab at it,
I can try and take a stab at it. So we're assuming that the question is mainly referring to field testing.
That's what I think, because we've got paper tests, obviously, for ass refs and snitch refs.
Yeah. So the idea behind a field test for snitches / referees is that it will be a complementary thing on top of the tests that we're running through Classmarker. Obviously, the Classmarker system, we're happy with it at the moment, but it's not perfect, and we want to build on it and improve it in the future. So having a field test for snitches and for all forms of referees is ideal. As I said earlier, the logistics of trying to organise several events that we can have our development coordinators at, so they can practically field test people, and we can actually start getting every single referee and snitch field tested. There's also a case of we'd have to outline in our event guidelines whether we require referees at certain events to be field tested in addition to being tested on the website. The groundwork has been done. Some of the groundwork has been done for both referee and snitch field testing, but obviously the practicalities of being able to do this on a large scale are difficult at the moment. It's something that, like as I said earlier, we want to be building towards in the future, but it's taking small steps at the moment, and then building upon it and seeing how we can improve the system, seeing how we can make the system more accessible so we can get out as many tests as we can and at least making sure the tests are of a sufficient quality, making sure that we review the tests and make sure that the testing procedure that we're doing is extensive enough and is fair, and is a good reflection of how good a referee or a snitch is. The field test that we managed to undertake at Valentine's, we've discussed it within our department, and we're quite happy with how the field test itself worked. So we're looking to expand on it. But again, unfortunately, we have our limitations at the moment. And moving forward, as I've said quite a lot tonight, it's definitely something that we want to work on.
Yeah, it's definitely one for the future, I think. But the fact that we got field tests with the whole IRDP situation going on last season was quite good, and they do seem to be more robust than the previous ones, having taken and failed both. This is this is probably the final question for tonight, unless we want to do the funny one, a la question time. But basically, how was ref scheduling for BQC determined? Was it based on merit or who was available? And we'll let the first part of that be answered, and then we'll get onto the second part of that after the first answer. I assume, Tom, this is you again.
So the short answer is a bit of both wherever available. So unfortunately, we have had the issue this season that we have been short on referee numbers. It's because the number of teams we're taking to tournaments is expanding. It's difficult for people to justify travelling to tournaments halfway across the country with the issue that we have for regionals, which is why we didn't have as many non-playing volunteers as possibly we would have liked. It's something in retrospect that we're going to be looking to see if we can improve, trying to make sure we have more non-playing volunteers next season, and working that into BQC, where we're at a stage where quite a lot of the teams that have a lot of qualified referees are playing, so a lot of the referees that are at BQC are playing. So a lot of work has gone into the schedule, and the referees, we've done, the best has been done with the resources that we have. We had to put in our requirement that teams brought a certain number of volunteers, and we had a fantastic response with regards to the number of goal referees, scorekeepers, and timekeepers that we have, and like, I'd like to extend my thanks to the community for managing to supply that many goal referees, scorekeepers, and timekeepers, because it definitely makes the running of the tournament a lot smoother when you're not running around a pitch on the day trying to find people to do random jobs. But we've done the best that we can with the resources we have at the moment. We're looking to see if we can improve this in the future, but again, it's a case of we have to do the best with what we've got at the moment and think about ways that we can improve the number of volunteers that we have at future tournaments.
So get qualified, basically, and get qualified, get experience.
There'll be more, the plan will hopefully be that we'll be pushing for more volunteers towards the start of the season to give people a lot more time to gain experience over the course of the season as well.
Yeah, definitely something that needs looking at. So the second part of this question, we've already answered the field testing that has come back. I definitely saw people being field tested at Valentine's. We've talked about field testing. I hope that's been answered, anonymous person. But how will reffing on day 2 be decided? I assume, obviously, who's free and who's not biased.
Again, deciding who referees on day 2 is always a challenge, because you don't know. It's impossible to rank teams and it's impossible to know who's going to play who until you actually have worked out who's the rankings at the end of day 1. So retrospectively, it's difficult to plan that far in advance as to who will exactly be doing what. But especially on day 2, we're going to be looking to put out as strong referee teams as we feasibly can for the stages, increasing onwards from like the first round of games on day 2. As teams get knocked out on day 2 as well, that frees up a lot more referees, so we can be a little bit more flexible with who we have. On day 1, we're more inclined to give everyone an opportunity to referee. I mean, we don't want to turn away people that have actively gone out and volunteered to referee or to snitch, because that's not how we want to present ourselves, as turning away people that are willing to come and help out, especially when we're quite low on numbers as we are. But we will be going through day 2 trying to ensure that we have the strongest ref teams on the day. We'll be keeping an eye out for referees and snitches that do particularly well over the course of the tournament, and seeing if we can have as strong a team as we can on the later stages of all games. With obviously, we could be limited in terms of some referees that we might want to use might be playing in the later stages. That is an issue that always becomes a slight possibility at some tournaments, but we'll make sure we're doing the best we can with the resource that we have.
Sounds vaguely sensible. So long as you do the same thing with commentators, I really don't care. Shameless self-promotion. Which is why I do this, really. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I believe. Apart from some follow-up questions, but if you want follow-ups, guys, it's probably best to email QUK, and you'll probably get like a proper measured response that makes sense to everyone, as opposed to something that's been garbled through me, and you might actually get to talk to the relevant person. Minutes are on the website, yes? Yes, there are nods.
Yes, just restate that. www.quidditchuk.org/about/constitution, as I said earlier. They're at the bottom of the constitution page. You can also go to the main homepage and you navigate to the About in the drop-down menu and then click on our constitution, and they're at the bottom of that page.
Excellent. So that brings our office hours to an end. Thank you to everyone who's watched. Thanks to Mel and James and Tom for coming along, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for hosting.
As well. Yeah,
No
thank
problem.
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.